I'd like to introduce myself, Dave Armendariz, street manager, and this is Daryl Winger, my chief, my right-hand man. Daryl is one of the most knowledgeable people there is probably on the planet when it comes to brine and winter maintenance. He has built our brine facilities, and he knows I'd put him up against anybody in the United States when it comes to brine. Daryl, with that said, take it away.
After that, I got a lot to live up to. We put together a little bit of information on our winter operations, some on the plan, some of our facilities and equipment. If you have any questions at any time, please ask them while the slide's up, because that's the time to do it. As far as our winter operations plan that you have in your pack, what we had before was really clumsy, didn't really explain what was done, had no level of service expected, and it was tough for the street department employees to understand, much less the public. We've completely rewritten it. It now includes all of Public Works. Prior to this, we only referred to the street department and a couple of solid waste loaders. Now the entire Public Works is included, so everybody is working basically under the same type of plan. We wrote it as guidelines instead of a policy, because a policy says you will do it this way every time. As you all know, snowstorms aren't the same every time, ice storms aren't the same, so we're writing it as guidelines to give some leeway so the people in charge can make the decision depending on the current conditions. It's in the review stage right now. It's been reviewed by all the Public Works managers. We're looking for input from you guys to make it better and make it a really good plan. We started writing this, I believe it was in August or September. As you can tell, it's taken a little bit of time to put it together. We don't want to throw something together and try to implement it and then have to amend it right away. So we're trying to do it right. We'd rather hold off on approving it until we get input from everybody. And this definitely does a better job of describing the city operations, the level of service, the types of roads, things like that. Once it's published on the city website, the public will be able to look through this and have a lot better idea of what we're looking at getting done. A few of the highlights: it describes the areas of the city responsibility. It's going to include the maps that Gary was referring to that show the level of service or the level of the priority routes, those roads that are not maintained by the city. We have several private roads within the city in addition to the ones that haven't been accepted. Like I said before, it's going to be easy for the citizens to get on and see what's there. And they'll know what they can expect out of it. Road system classifications and the priorities and the level of service, we had some of that in our old plan, but it wasn't very descriptive. So hopefully this is going to be a lot easier for the public to see. It'll include the map so they can see it. Prior to this, the old one listed every street in text, and most people can't read say 12th Street and in their mind think of where it's at. So now we're going to have the map as an attachment. They can look at it and tell exactly what it is. Snow emergency policy, that was a little cumbersome this time. Gary mentioned, when do we implement it, things like that. And in the discussions and looking at what is in code for it, it's not the best written ordinance for this. We need to update it and clarify what is expected, both from the city and the citizens. And then the plan also describes the materials we use and how we use them, such as salt, sand, brine, things like that.
Mr. Weiner, before
Yes.
you continue, and maybe you're going to cover this in future slides, but reading through your draft here, and I was going to ask Mr. Kessel and Ms. Kripe about one of the things that are prohibited by city operators is towing or pushing any vehicles not owned by the city of Dickinson. Is the ambulance service owned in any way by the city of Dickinson?
Commissioner Decker, President Decker, no, it is not. That's a private entity that we of course work with on a regular basis, but it is owned and operated completely separate from the city of Dickinson.
Is that something we maybe need to look at in that what it prohibits, if we have a plow out or front end loader out and we have an ambulance stuck, well, the way I read this is we're not gonna assist them.
We won't, we're not supposed to hook onto private vehicles because vehicles are not built like they used to be.
Right,
And
I fully
but
understand that.
We have gone and we will continue to go, we'll plow them in to get in and out of where they need to be. Also, on approval of either David or myself, we would possibly, in an emergency, be able to, we would authorize our people to pull them out.
I would think
As a
the
general
ambulance-
rule, we do not, but case-by-case basis, once again, it's a guideline, not a policy.
Okay.
If,
Well, I was just looking, and I know the ambulances are built pretty robust, so they probably have a few hookup points that they can be towed out. I just, was concerned that you'd have a policy and say, no, we're not gonna touch you, and it's an emergency and we need to move them.
Again, these are guidelines, so
Right, okay.
your input is.
when we do our snow removal training at the beginning of every season, that's one of the things we address. That
Okay.
if there's a vehicle in the way and needs to be moved, they need to contact one of us and get the approval to do it. So,
I know there's a lot of conditions out there right now. There's probably some buried vehicles still in some areas that I've driven through anyway, so. Okay,
okay. This is the last one on the winter operations plan, so if anybody has any questions on the plan, this is it. We're gonna go on to our facilities next. First thing we'll discuss is the brine facility. It was constructed last year. The brine maker was installed starting November 4th of last year. It was the newest of the new. We had the first of the new generation brine maker. It works, or it worked at that time, but it didn't work the best. They've done quite a bit of upgrading on the software and some of the other stuff, and we've got it working excellent. The road salt that we get on the state contract out of Canada works great for spreading on the roads, but it doesn't work with our brine maker. So we had to find a source of solar salt that works excellent on it. During this last snowstorm, on the first day, we made over 30,000 gallons of brine, and we weren't sitting there watching it. The other operator that worked with the brine, installing the brine maker, him and I were in the 2 plow trucks, and our route, about every 2 hours, we'd be back at the facility. We'd top off the salt hopper and check on it. So the automatic part of it is working very well. Also, the truck loading, every load you load, you can choose what type of blend you want. We use 2 different additives. One is a beet juice product, and the other is called Ice Be Gone Magic. What they do is they lower the temperature that the brine is effective. Normal brine will work to about 8 to 10 degrees above zero. A 20% concentrate of the beet juice will drop that to about 8 to 10 below. 20% of the Ice Be Gone Magic will drop it to almost 30 below. So we can vary the percentage of each additive, we can choose which additive, and it's all automatically loaded by this system.
Daryl, how many gallons, over here, how many gallons of brine and salt did we use in the last couple of weeks? I know David has that handy, just,
We used
David's got-
40,000 gallons of brine
how many?
on this storm, 40,000 gallons. We used 250 tons of sand, and we used 650 tons of salt.
And how much does the ice have to accumulate before you make the call to get the brine trucks out?
The brine trucks, depending on conditions, and depending on which material we're gonna use, it depends on the air temperature, the surface temperature, how much precipitation we're getting, what form the precipitation, so there's a lot of things. But ideally, we're gonna try to get out before the storm and pre-treat. You've probably seen the DOT going doing that. We're trying to do that proactively. Other than that, it depends on how much moisture is there. This storm, we were out at the beginning of it with the brine. For the first day, we were using almost exclusively brine. As we got more moisture, it ceased to be effective because it was diluting too much. We switched to granular salt, and then when the temperatures dropped drastically where the salt doesn't work as effective, we switched to mixed sand and salt. So it's a continuous deal. We have to evaluate every time we load a truck, basically. And then the other point on here is brine sales. Because we are the only producer of brine in the area, we're not in competition with private business, so we have opened it up and offered it to sale for private contractors. At this time, we have one private contractor who's bought from us, and the public school district has a truck set up, and they're getting it from us, and then we're using it ourselves. At this time, that's the only users of it. We've had other people asking about it. Stark County is working on putting a truck together, so they'll be able to use some. So, we'll be able to help recoup part of the cost of this with the sales. A few pictures of that. Overall, it is an overall view of the brine facility. The large part is our material shed. The shed on the right is the room that contains the brine making equipment, and the tanks on the right are storage. The 4 in the back are brine, and the 2 front ones are the 2 additives. They're 12,000 gallon tanks. In there, that is the salt tank where we actually make the brine. The auger, that yellow pipe coming up, augers salt in from the material shed, drops it into the salt tank, and the equipment automatically circulates water and makes the brine. This is the other side of it, another view of the same tank. This is the brains of the operation. On the bottom is the pump and the valves that control the flow. The panel up on the upper right is the brains. We program in how many gallons we want to make, and it goes ahead and does it. We also have manual control of all the operations from that panel. There are 3 of us that are very informed on this and can go in and do the manual operations. Now that the equipment is up and running properly, we'll be getting more of our people trained so they can make the brine too. But as of now, it's only 3 of us doing it. And this is the truck loading skid. Once the brine is made and out in the tanks, this is what actually makes the mixture to go into the trucks. It'll open a valve from the brine and from one or both of the additives. It monitors the flow rate and adjusts the valves accordingly as it's loading. Truckers can pull up outside. There's a panel outside the building. They put in their truck number, what product they want, basically what percentage of the additives they want, how many gallons they want to load, push a button, and this thing automatically kicks in, loads it, and shuts down when they have whatever they had or whatever they requested. So all automated and finally working the way it's supposed to. And then this is the inside of the material shed. The way on the right there, the white salt, that's the solar salt that we use for making the brine. The enclosure way on the right is the salt hopper. We dump salt into that with a loader and the auger takes it in. The second one, the big pile, that is the road salt that we get out of Canada. That pile is no longer that big. It's been replenished already in the last couple of weeks. And we have 2 other bins toward the other end. One of them holds the rock we use for our Durapatcher for patching streets in the summer, and the furthest one is our mixed sand and salt. And generally we have a 4-to-1 mixture, 4 parts of salt, or 4 parts of sand and 1 part of salt. And that's what we've been using these days. So the brine is basically 23.3% salt dissolved in the water. Plain and simple, anybody can make it. The uses are anti-icing, which is when we go out ahead of the storm and put brine down to help keep the ice from bonding to the pavement. Pre-wetting, our sanders all have tanks and pumps on them, so the sand or the salt is wet before it hits the ground. That helps not only in making it stick to the ground, but it also helps it activate sooner. Dry salt, when it hits the ground, bounces and blows away. Studies have shown you lose as much of 1/3 of it into the ditches that way. By pre-wetting it, most of it sticks. And the other thing is, dry salt has to take a while to start melting ice and get wet before it works. So if it's wet before it hits the ground, it works immediately. Another use for brine is de-icing. We're in the process of that now that we have little warmer temperatures. We've had our trucks out today running brine, and it'll get through and break the bond of the ice and the snow with the pavement, so we can go across with our plows and take it out. And then we have some pictures of some of our application equipment. The truck on the right is a 1,000-gallon tank. It's a gravity bar. The middle one is a 500-gallon tank on an F-550 Ford, also gravity. The one on the left is our newest one. We just got that put together, and a couple of my guys built the skid and mounted everything. That's a pressurized system, which hopefully in next year's budget, we're gonna put pressurized systems on all of our trucks. With that one, it's got a GPS sensor on it, and the controller, we can set it for how many gallons per lane mile we want. For pre-treating, the starting point is 45 gallons per lane mile. So you set that, and it's capable of spreading 3 lanes. The one straight down, and then it can do one on either side. We can turn them on and off at will as we go. So if we're going down the road and a vehicle is coming at us, we can turn that bar off so we don't spray them, turn it back on when we're past. That'll allow us to control the amount of brine we put down a lot better. The gravity feed depends on how much head pressure there is from brine in the tank, your traveling speed and all that. So it's, the pressure system is the way to go to really control how much we're putting down. And then the materials we use, salt. It's the quickest way to return roads back to bare pavement because it'll actually melt the ice. Application rates, once again, all kinds of factors, anywhere from 100 to 300 pounds per lane mile. Just as a comparison, 100 pounds per lane mile comes out to about 1 grain of rock salt per square foot. So we're not putting much down. And then pre-wetting, I talked about that already. It helps keep the salt on the road and make it work quicker. Salt and sand, that's the mixture 4-to-1. When it gets colder, the salt is not as effective, so you need something for the public to have traction. That's the sand. There's also salt in it to help keep the sand from freezing in the stockpiles and also to help start the melting action. The environmental consequences with sand are that it can get into the waterways. The health department doesn't really like that. So in addition to paying to buy the sand, we also have to pay to pick it up in the spring and hope not too much gets into the rivers. So most agencies are getting away from sand as much as possible. But like I said before, when it gets colder, you still have to use sand for traction. And that's one of our salt trucks. The white tank on the side there, that's a brine tank for the pre-wetting. And these are the trucks that the commission was so generous to buy for us last year, and they are working very well. They have 3 snow plows on them. The big one in the front, the nose plow, the wing sticking out to the side, which extends it, so we're able to plow about 1.5 lanes with every pass with this. And there's also one underneath the truck. They call it an underbody scraper. We can put pressure on that one and actually scrape the snow and ice off. So between the 3 of them, we can do a pretty good job of moving snow, and during this snowstorm, we were moving a lot of snow with it.
If I could interrupt quick,
Yes.
Daryl. Right now, because those are major pieces of equipment, and if you get in them, there's buttons and dials and 4 cameras and lasers and all this in it. Right now, we only have 3 qualified operators that can run that, Daryl being one of them. Another one of them, Jeff, of course, but another one is from Idaho, and he'd ran DOT trucks in Idaho. But during the storm, he was luckily on a cruise in the Hawaiian Islands, so he didn't get back till just this week. So we were down to 2, you know, real qualified, and I really want to thank Daryl and Jeff for putting the hours they did. They were running those things 16-hour-plus days, but thanks for letting me interrupt there, Daryl.
It's a lot more comfortable in one of these things than it is bouncing in a blade.
Are we looking to train more people up in the
Yes.
department? Okay.
We got them last year, but we didn't have much snow. We got them in, I believe, November, so we didn't have much chance to use them. The three of us are fairly familiar with them. You know, still have mistakes where we grab the wrong joystick. But we'll be getting more people planned as things slow down and we can actually have some time to put 2 people in one piece of equipment. These also, we invested in camera systems so we can watch the different systems. We can see how much material we've got left in the box. We've got one looks at the wing plow so we can see what's happening there. One looks down at the spinner so we can see if and how much material is coming off. And the fourth one, I always like to tell people, that looks straight back so you can see who's going to run into you from the back end.
Now, we don't use these exclusively on the bypass, or are they just used for that?
Most of our time was spent on the truck route all the way around town. You know, the bypass, 10th Avenue East, 21st Street, State Avenue, and 8th Street, and 6th Avenue South, East and West. Other than that, we used them on the rest of 21st Street that isn't part of the outside loop, 14th and 15th Streets, and 12th Street and Museum Drive. There are other streets they can be used on, but by the time we got those done, we had to go back around and keep routing. But they are usable on more than just that. Residential roads, though, not so much. I tried going by the ambulance shop with it, and with cars parked on both sides of the narrow street, I ended up backing out. I was able to get as far as the ambulance shop, couldn't get any further.
We did invest in the laser that I saw was on the news, Fargo using it. We did invest with that. So if we get in more of a residential with a curb and gutter, it does give you the edge of the road, I believe, correct, Darrell?
Yeah, the laser is adjusted so it projects a green dot out in front of you at about where the wing is. So if you're going along and that laser happens to hit a guardrail, if you don't move, your wing will hit the guardrail. So it's a guide to help you look ahead and see where your wing is going to be at. And we use that, like Gary said, we have used it, I've used it on Westridge Drive out to Menards, and it's real helpful because if you can see the curb under the snow, you know where your wing is going to be, and you're not going to be jumping the wing up on top of the curb and doing landscaping for the homeowners. Unfortunately, we do some landscaping every so often. And then the tanks on this also are the brine tanks for pre-wetting. This is one of our loader plows. We have a total of 4 front-end loaders. One of them normally stays at the shop to reload sanders and take care of other issues around there. It's a relatively small one. The other 3 were all out with these loader plows during most of the storm. And one of them is now, for about the last 2 weeks, has had a snowblower on trying to widen streets. And motor grader, we have 3 of these. We have one that normally is at the landfill during the summer, and we were lucky enough that their operator came in and helped us out during the storm and ran that one. And that is the loader-mounted snow blower. We have a total of 4 snow blowers. This one can put out a lot of snow. We also have 2 other loader-mounted ones that are older, single-stage blowers. They aren't able to blow as much, but they still are useful. And the 4th blower is Oshkosh snow blower that is self-propelled. It's military surplus. As near as we can figure out, it was built possibly in about 1961 to 65. And it's in the shop right now. We had a catastrophic breakdown on it, and hopefully in the next day or so, that'll be up and running again. So that's all we have. If anyone's interested in riding along, can't go in the loaders or the motor graders, there isn't enough room, but the sanders and the plow trucks, if anybody's interested, we can arrange to take you with next time and see what we go through. Facility tours out at the Public Works Building and the Brine facility are always available. We're happy to show off what we have. We're very proud of the Brine facility. It's state-of-the-art, as is our building. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions.